Hello and welcome back to another episode here at the SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Kohlman. You know me as Smith is Smoking on the message boards, joined by the best host that money can buy, but which we will never have. Korey Karbowsky, you know him as Corey 39 on the boards, and Wil Masisak, you know him as Bradshaw to Ben. Well, gentlemen, I sure thought we'd be at this point this weekend. Unfortunately, we are. Just because I'm a realist, and nowadays, screw that optimistic bullshit. As we predicted, I think all of us predicted a two-score defeat at a minimum, and sure enough, it was exactly two touchdowns that your Pittsburgh Steelers lost by. The funny thing is, if you look at a score, it makes it look like it was an actual football game. But we all know that wasn't the case, unfortunately. Ravens really came out and socked it to us. Just kind of an embarrassing loss for this franchise to be absolutely railroaded like we were against this team. Literally took us on the tracks and ran over us, and then backed up over us, and then ran over us again. That's just kind of how it felt like watching that game. What's even more infuriating was oh, we need points, and sure enough, we actually put up two touchdowns in the third quarter to make it seem like we might have a shot. Which, by the way, screw you, Steelers, you're assholes. You made me sort of somewhat believe at the very last second there, just to be totally thrown back down. So lots of different things we're going to get into tonight. Let's jump into this game. I think the biggest disappointment from this game is, yeah, we lost, but the manner in which we lost was just appalling in every sense of the word, from the lack of effort to what we were trying to do schematically, lots of different things. Let's jump into the lack of effort, gentlemen. I don't think I've ever seen a Steeler team look this bad from an effort standpoint ever. And I understand I'm not an old man. I understand I'm not a young man anymore. But it's like I feel like I've been watching the Steelers for roughly 2 decades now, since I was about 13, 14. And this is easily the worst effort I've seen out of a Pittsburgh Steeler team ever.
You
So
you got a short memory, dude.
I was about to say I'm
You
gonna
got
throw
a
it to Will
short
because he has
memory.
more
First of
years.
all,
But
I'll let them somewhat off the hook for Buffalo. I don't know their effort was really the problem there. It was just like the, between the weather and the farting around with the changing schedule and just the fact they were going to Buffalo. And the Kansas City game got out of hand, but once again, they're so overmatched that was, something. But let's talk the Cleveland Browns playoff game in 2020. Let's
okay, that
talk
was pretty bad.
the Jacksonville divisional game when the Steelers at that point were at minimum a top five team in the league, probably had the best offense and had a really good defense.
Mm-hmm.
They got they when they came out and Jacksonville just ran the ball down their throats and threw a couple of passes to the tight end. They couldn't tackle anybody. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop play action. They couldn't do anything against an absolutely horrific offense with a bad quarterback that was out of the league in like 3 years. Like that's exactly what we saw on Saturday. So to me, it was completely expected. Bear in mind, this whole year of the podcast, last year of the podcast, the year before the podcast, going back even further, like every time we talk about them during the season, this is what I'm thinking. It's like, the reality check is what they look like in the postseason these years. And what happens in and of a certain game or certain week against a lesser opponent, that doesn't mean as much to me anymore because I understand where it's headed. And the most disappointing by far part of this loss was how it fits into the scheme of like nothing is changing and we're reliving the same, it's Groundhog Day, which is appropriate because the head coach is afraid of his own shadow, and that's why it's Groundhog Day. I'm just like I'm tired of being Charlie Brown and Lucy with the football, so they don't even get me there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most disappointing thing. End of rant.
Take it away, Corey. Your thoughts on the piss poor effort we saw on Saturday.
I so desperately want something new. And it can't come in the form of quarterback. We had that this year. We had Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who we had a prospect and an old vet. It's not going to come in the form of you know DC or defensive or offensive coordinator, because we've seen time and time again that we can't hire anyone who's gonna, reinvent the wheel or anything. And that just leaves one man, and that's Tomlin. I remember 3 years ago, Will was kind of a little bit in front of me and Jeremy on the get Tomlin out of here train.
Yeah.
And in the middle of this losing skid, I'm like, I'm getting sick of it, but let's just see in playoffs, right? This has to be like this. This should be the final straw. And I know that there are a lot of teams who'd love to have the success we did, yada yada yada. But the only Super Bowls we won, we inherited someone else's team and managed it fairly well, yeah. But we inherited someone else's team, and for the people who kind of like want to push the blame on like personnel and he doesn't have the talent, Mike Tomlin, I think, is really the GM. He signs off on every draft pick. He signs off on every free agent. Like the
Every
level
coach.
of control he has, I think, is not far. What'd you say?
Every coach.
Every coach, the level of control he has is not far, if not equal, to what Bill Belichick had in New England. I'm sure maybe our scouts and our personnel guys maybe bring up some more of the later round guys who haven't done anything for the most part either. But in terms of our elite pick, our top picks, Tomlin signs off on every one of those. It's a big deal how he goes to the Senior Bowl. He goes to the combine. He does all this stuff. He's such an integral part of these pre-draft meetings that there's nowhere to look except him for why the scheme is boring and unimaginative and the same year after year, offense and defense. The only time where there was any flavor was when we brought in a defensive coordinator / head coach who had been basically excommunicated from the league, and Brian Flores, and we lost him after a year. And it can't be if we want to pin it on a talent issue, yeah, Colbert drafted bad, but Tomlin was right next there. Like there was not a single pick Tomlin didn't sign off of, and he was with him on every one of those visits, on every one of those meals, on every one of those, meetings and whiteboards and all those things. Tomlin's been there every step of the way. There's nowhere to look but him in this. And signing up for another year of this is, I just don't get what another running it back with the same coach. I don't get what that does for you, not just next year, but the next 3-4 years.
Well, it's especially important. I'm sorry, Jeremy, I'll send it back to you. It's especially important this year because they have so many free agents. They have so many people that are probably cut candidates on top of that, and they have no quarterbacks. So you're talking about really setting the tone for the next 3, 4, 5 years of the franchise this offseason. As a matter of fact, you also have TJ Watt needs to get an extension this summer. It's like you got to make some huge decisions about the direction of the franchise. So if you're not going to make a move now, but you think you might make one in a year, you're going to really handcuff yourself before you get to that point.
If I could say one thing, it's not to. I don't want to discredit Kahn and Weidel because I think that those two actually, I feel like they're probably really good at what they do. I think that they have an eye for talent, and I'm not mad at how we've drafted for the most part the last 2 years. However, I do not think that with Tomlin in the fold, any quarterback that Tomlin will sign off of will not be a Super Bowl contending quarterback. And so it doesn't matter how well you draft outside of that. If you have the Tomlin schemes and a Tomlin quarterback in play, I think you're dead in the water. It doesn't matter how well. You could have the Eagles O-line. That's a question with Hurts. Hurts is levels above what we have. And there's a question of if Hurts can pilot that tank of a team offensively, defensively, all the talent they have, people are questioning if Hurts can lead that. And I don't see an avenue to get even anywhere close to the level of play they're getting out of Hurts this year, especially with Tomlin at the helm. So I really question. The main point of that was I think Kahn and Weidel, I think that those two, they could work. I don't think they need to be part of the ship that goes, but I just don't think any quarterback that Tomlin will sign off of with the brand of football he wants to play is gonna work. No matter how well they draft, even if they ignore him.
Yeah. I know you said, oh, let Jeremy respond. I wasn't really sure how to add to this, just with how we've been going, in all honesty. But I
I
mean,
mean, hey, Jeremy, do you want Mike Tomlin to make any more defensive picks in the first round? Like, okay, they've been really heavy offense, and it's sort of like, well, I guess it's this pendulum has swung back. Maybe they'll make a defensive pick this year, but the last four, okay, TJ Watt's one of them, but the other three are Artie Burns, Dion Bush, and Terrell Edmonds, right?
yeah,
So the thing is, weren't people coming into the season when they signed Patrick Queen, were not people saying that the Steelers were loaded on offense, on defense? They were going to have, the best defense that they've ever had personnel wise, and they spent the most money. It's like if you have all the talent in the world, quote unquote, not really true, but if you have all this talent and you're a defensive minded coach and you want to build your team around defense, and this is the best you can come up with, what on earth would give us hope for going into the future? It's like at this point, like Korey said, it's just can we just try something else? Can we try some new stuff, try some new schemes? I'm like, let's see what a 4-3 defense looks like in Pittsburgh. Let's do
Well,
something that changes the game a little bit.
I think the part that's going to make us lose our heads about this because it's coming. We're not going to trade Tomlin, but some team would trade for him, and so like Jacksonville would give up good picks to get Tomlin. Like, will that be the case in a year, 2 years? If this continues, like in all reality, over the next 2 years, the Steelers are still probably talented enough to go have winning seasons, borderline winning seasons, either just miss the wild card or lose in it. Same exact position we've been in for the last 4 years. Like this is especially with a guy like Ben Johnson on the market, where as messy as all this is, you tell Ben Johnson, hey, you see how many coaches the Steelers have had in the last 100 years. Come be the next Pittsburgh head coach. I really think it would be hard for a team to top that because the biggest thing is job security in the NFL.
Mhm.
And if you get some modicum of control, you get what's perceived as a good front office, good ownership, all this stuff. It's like, it's just going to make us want to bash our heads through a wall when we inevitably just decide to run it back next year, let alone sign Russell Wilson for 3 years, $100 million, which, boy, all this talk about the economy and the election, and we just watched Russell Wilson. He's about to get $100 million richer. How
It's
about
going to
that?
be more. I mean, if they sign Russell Wilson, it's going to be more than that, guys. It's like there are 21 quarterbacks in the league who are making more than 37.5, and that's before the increase in salary cap and also inflation. When you consider about some of those deals are like more than 2 years old in real dollars now, there's like they would be worth a lot more money. So I just for the record, as bad as the season ended for Russell Wilson, if he's the guy you're going to sign and you're signing him to a 3-year deal, expect it to be north of 100 million. Can we before we get into the quarterbacks and personnel and whatever, can we talk about coaching staff for a second?
yeah. I actually wanted. I was going there, so let me take over this because you guys brought up a very interesting concept in the whole trading Tomlin, potentially bringing in a guy like Ben Johnson. The issue there isn't that maybe we could find a way, God forbid, to ship Mike Tomlin off to some organization for a few draft picks to give us some more draft picks this year to get our change of scenery. Ben Johnson came out very publicly last year and said he wants at least 10 million to go somewhere and be a head coach, or some pretty high number. But here's my thing. The Steelers have been so cheap when it's come to all of their other coaching staff. What makes us think that we could tell Ben Johnson, you could come here, you can bring whoever you want here, and that this Steelers run organization would pony up that type of money for everything he wants to do?
Yeah.
That
And
that like
Kirby, you think they're going to tell him, we don't care about playing Steelers football anymore. Whatever you need to do, Ben, to run it the way you want to run it. Like that's the problem with this job is that now
right.
it's come with a clear mandate to do things a certain way. So until ownership or control of the team changes, like to me, biggest problems, the head coach and the ownership are tied, and the assistant coaching staff from top to bottom, excluding possibly Danny Smith, like, yeah, that's at least, if it's not 1C, it's at least, number 3 on the list.
Right. So
So
it's at this point,
it's
we've
ugly.
been joking about other teams' ownership situations and how terrible it is. We have slowly morphed into like the lesser of the evils of that. Like we've been joking for years about how Jimmy Haslam's an idiot in Cleveland and went out and spent a ton of money on a quarterback with a ton of off the field issues. Let's just put it that way. I was going to say something stronger, but it's still allegedly, so I won't do that. We joke about Jerry Jones being too meddlesome with how he wants things run in Dallas, and it's like, look in the mirror, Steelers fans. We've got that to a degree. Like it's idiotic how we have to run the football. We have to play good defense. And I'm not saying that those are bad things to build a franchise around, but when you're not even good at it, what the hell are we doing? It's like we gave up 300 rushing yards to the Baltimore Ravens in a playoff game and ran for 10 times less. We ran for 29 yards against the Ravens.
We
So
would have
can't
given
even
up.
do what we want to do with the mandates we're trying to put in place.
By the way, we would have given up over 300 yards except for the kneel down at the end. So there's that.
You're right. You're right.
Where the Steelers are cosplaying as an old school blue collar throwback football team. That's what it is. They are
Yeah, because
pretending.
we're not.
Put
We're
on the
not.
uniforms of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're pretending to play Steelers football with the Steelers ethos, but in reality, they're like some, the what do they call that? Like a when fans make a version of Star Wars, like
Fan made film
yeah,
or
it's like
whatever.
that's like the version of the Steelers that we have. I would like to see this year's team go against the strike team of 1982 or whatever that was. Pretty fair fight. Steve Bono, they have a better quarterback. So yeah, anyway, I want to get to the assistant coaches because people talk about, okay, you had, you
Let's just go ahead and dive into that. Let's coaching in
Chuck
general.
Noll's demise, Cowher. If here's an argument that people make. There was a point in 2003 or 4 where people were saying the same stuff about Bill Cowher, and then he got a quarterback and suddenly he won the Super Bowl and he changed his tune and whatever. But here's the thing about Cowher. Cowher kept them competitive without a great quarterback for such a long time, and one of the secrets to that was his assistant coaches were amazing. He had dudes. He had one of the best defensive coordinators of all time,
Mhm.
right? He had Chan Gailey brought in to run. We're going to suddenly run 5 wides and throw the ball all over the field when no one was doing that. Like, can you imagine Mike Tomlin hiring, like I don't know, Mike McDaniel to come in and like wing the ball everywhere and run. It's just like we would never bring in an assistant who was going to actually affect change like that. But they had dudes. They had Dom Capers that invented the zone blitz.
Yeah.
There was they had uh, future coach of the year in the NFL, Bruce Arians, who won the coach of the year twice. So yeah, that difference between like that staff and what the Steelers have run out the last whatever
Well,
5
and
6
so
years.
I don't know. What are you talking about, Will? Our offensive coordinator is getting head coach looks right now.
let's hope he does. Let's hope he does.
Please, I don't want to laugh at that. I don't want to even jinx it for fear that someone with the Jets will like watch the show. Oh,
but
yeah.
but
I mean,
yeah,
I guess
you're
they
not
do
wrong.
understand. They do understand that Arthur Smith is only doing what Mike Tomlin wants him to do. So there is that part of it. But yeah, Whew.
But yeah, I mean, you make a great point. And people have said it too. Mike Tomlin does not have a coaching tree at all. The only tree, like semi branches that came off this thing, were coaches he inherited. You know, Bruce Arians was on staff and got naturally promoted through the ranks. So was Randy Fichtner, and he wasn't even that great. And he had Dick LeBeau for quite a few numbers of years, and I'm kind of forgetting who came after him. Who was it? Keith Butler, who was not great by any means, but like even we've washed out of all the coaches that have that he inherited. Since then, it's been no one. And Brian Flores doesn't count because that was a 1-year signing and then he left.
Yeah,
To take a
Munchak,
big job.
Munchak was a good
Did
sign.
Munchak though?
What's that?
Did he inherit Munchak?
Oh, I didn't think so. I think
I
Munchak,
thought he might have been on the team at one point off and then came back. I can't remember.
well, I think he was a head coach, and then he was one of those cats that wasn't working as a head coach anymore, and they brought him in. Let's see. Yeah, he was the head coach of the Titans, and then came in 2014 to the Steelers.
How long did we have him for?
4 years.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a great 4 years too.
Yeah.
That to me is I give him credit to bringing that guy. Of course, it's not like he picked that guy out of a pile and said you should be promoted to offensive line coach. It was like, but he was a stud. But yeah, that's a good hire and someone that agreed to come for whatever reason, and then also got, I don't know if he got run out of town, but he certainly got tired of being here. So it's like I feel like all the problems that we've discussed right now are solvable, but the easiest and fastest way for them to get solved is to rip off the Band-Aid and get a completely new ownership head. Like, in other words, Art Rooney turns it over to Danny Rooney, who, by the way, is the same age, or more or less almost exactly the same age as both as Art Rooney was, or excuse me, as Dan Rooney was when Art Rooney handed it off to him. And it's like you turn it over ownership to somebody with a different mindset. You get Tomlin to be happy to Andy Reid himself to some other location where they really want him. You get compensation for that. You have this opportunity to totally rebuild the roster. You get a new head coach and a new head coaching staff and a new way of thinking things, and you get a fresh start. It's like you may not be able to get a quarterback immediately doing that, but you certainly can give the fan base hope and get yourself on a path that leads somewhere better, the promise of being better in 2 or 3 years. This is the off season. If ever there was one, you have no quarterback side. You're not tied to anybody. So now's the time.
I don't know, Will. You don't want to cash in the Mike Tomlin picks that you receive for Cam Ward?
Well, yeah. Okay. My perfect dream scenario is that you convince, Johnson to come and be your head coach, Ben Johnson, and you use whatever picks you get from Mike Tomlin and whatever else you need to do beyond that to get yourself moved up and get Cam Ward. Yes, 100%. Because then even if you didn't have that much draft capital left over for a year, you've got cap space galore. People will want to come and play. People are going to want to come and play for Ben Johnson, and they're certainly on offense going to want to come and play with a team that has a young rookie with promise like that, right? Compared to whatever they run out there. Sam Darnold signs, and that's the quarterback they end up with. Nobody's coming to get passes from Sam Darnold under a Mike Tomlin regime. It's like, forget it. Like, you're not getting T. Higgins. You're not getting Stephon Diggs. It's not happening. So why not get it on now? And even if you can't move up far enough to get Cam Ward this year, you certainly can put yourself in position to have capital enough to move up next year when hopefully there will be at least 2 or 3 guys that you might want to hang your hat on.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, Corey's on this train now. He's trying to get me sucked in to the whole, we could get Ben Johnson and Cam Ward. It could be done. Because I've been saying for a year, whoever gets if someone manages to get Ben Johnson and Cam Ward, like the Giants fire their guys and they get Ben Johnson and end up with Cam Ward and Ben Johnson, they're going to win Super Bowls within the next 5 years. Like, it doesn't matter how bad their roster is now. But if it turns out that your more likely scenario is that Ben Johnson goes to Vegas, Cam Ward goes to Cleveland, and we end up with 3 quarterbacks in our division who can all play, and we're just doomed at that point to purgatory forever after we sign Sam Darnold, as I said.
Yeah. So but we've kind of gone down an interesting little rabbit hole here because there's a million different tunnels that we can go into. Let's kind of start.
Actually, Jeremy, sorry, since I mentioned Sam Darnold 3 times, the reason I mentioned it is, did you guys happen to see the odds for who the Steelers starting quarterback would be the week 1 of 2025?
I know Sam Darnold was number 1 and Justin Fields was number 3. Oh, Aaron Rodgers number too, if
Yeah,
that's
so
acceptable.
Sam Darnold at 3-1, Aaron Rodgers at 4-1, Justin Fields at 5-1, Russ Wilson at 6-1, Jalen Milroe and Quinn Ewers at 7-1, Kirk Cousins at 9-1, JJ McCarthy 16-1, and Tanner McKee, in case you really want to dive into next year's quarterback draft, 50-1. But it's like we're just any of those names inspire you to think that, something could fundamentally change with this team if we just can get one of those guys. It's what a
I,
horrible year to want a quarterback.
I have a legit question here. How many quarterbacks have kind of had a like middle to late of and middle of their career, like they were bad and then they kind of like sit and then they turn good and they turn good for more than 1 year. Like Gino is kind of a question mark in that, but like who else? Like am I just missing where I'm assuming Sam Darnold's supposed to be really good next year? I know that I was the Sam Darnold hater for like the whole first half of this year because I picked against the Vikings every time, but maybe I'm misremembering some things.
No, I thought Darnold, the clock turned midnight on him last week. So I'll be surprised if this lingers. Like, I think you're going to end up seeing my scenario. I imagine is that Sam Darnold is going to kind of fade in this game as well tonight, and that they'll end up trying to play JJ McCarthy next year and move Sam Darnold. That feels like what's going to happen there. But to me, the story is really he moved into, a system with Kevin O'Connell, and that dude is like an offensive mind that comes from the tree with McVay and Shanahan and whatever. It's like, of course he's going to be better there. He's playing in a system that's quarterback friendly, and he's got talent. He's just been, it's like if you ask him to carry a team, especially when you run an offense that sucks, like if he were to come to Pittsburgh, there is no way he plays like he played this year. It's
Well,
not. That would be unbelievable.
let's line some things up real quick. Their O line is at best or at worst about on par with ours. I'd say at worst about on par with ours. They have a better running back. Aaron Jones is better than Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. They have a better tight end. They have a much better receiving core, much better receiving core. So you're going to take this less talented quarterback and you're going to drop him into a system with way less playmakers. And that's supposed to be a recipe for improvement over what we had this year. Like Russell Wilson, you could at least sell me on like the dude can throw a go ball and George Pickens can catch a go ball. That was going to be, we could run the ball and we could do that. That's something. Like it's not much, but it's something. Darnold, I have even less faith than Russell Wilson coming in.
And again, why would he come to Pittsburgh? They're not winning a championship, and they're not going to run a system that's going to make him look good for his next job. It's like, why would he come? I don't know. I don't understand. Like he'd have to get paid more than we're talking about giving Russell Wilson. Like you're going to give Sam Darnold 40 million a year. Like, good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, since we're talking about quarterbacks, guys that might be willing to come to Pittsburgh, the list is extremely low. Obviously, I'll be shocked if we don't re-sign Russell Wilson. Honestly, it just kind of feels like that's the way we're headed. Not
Don't
that
say
I
that.
want to, but it just feels like we're headed there.
Imagine the Boo Birds week one. Just imagine.
I'm trying to live in delusional land right now
All right,
where
fair enough.
I just really like I'm not honest to God, I'm not even a big Shador Sanders fan. But God, like I would take it. Like I would take it so anything over Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Justin, like just give me something young. I don't care if they throw 20 interceptions. Just
At least we're trying.
Okay,
yes.
wait. How far down the list of quarterbacks in this draft class, as far as we know, because there's still a little time till Wednesday to really know, but how far down the list of potential prospects would you be willing to go and still feel that way? So in other words, are you making it down to Quinn Ewers? You making it down to
Milrow,
Ward?
maybe,
Like how far
Drew
does it go?
Aller.
How far does this go down?
Okay, so Shador I'm good with. Cam I'm good with, obviously. And Shador, Cam's on a different level than Shador for me. Just, Milrow, I wouldn't feel great about it, but I'd feel better than going back with Russell Wilson. like at least it's something. At least there's like speed and arm talent, and I'll watch us just bomb for another pick. That'll be Ewers, arm talent, better than Sam Darnold. I think the Jackson Dart and Will Howard tier is where I probably like
Very
Oh,
good. Very
you
good.
some of the talent there. I think that's where I probably draw the line.
Mhm.
yeah, at that point, you'd be better off being a Justin Fields. You know what I mean? It's like that's the sort of
And
it would have
I'm
to
not
be somebody better than Justin Fields for me to get even remotely interested.
and I'm not even like I've supported Will Howard more than some other people since his days back to Kansas State, and even I like Will Howard's probably where I put the break.
Draw.
Jackson. Well,
Right.
I don't see it with him, but ugh. This
Jackson
is
Dart
such a
is Justin Fields in terms of reading the field, one read and get rid of it or run, but with a whole lot less talent. That's the
yeah.
problem with Jackson Dart.
It,
Anyway, sorry, we totally boxed out Jeremy. Jeremy, I'm just going to be super quiet. I'm not going to say anything no matter what you say until you tell me.
No, I mean, well, this is kind of the direction I wanted to go because we have a lot of questions about who's going to be leading this team next year. And quarterback is obviously the position that you live and die by. So that's what we've been talking about. So we've kind of gone that direction. I mean, right now, I find it hard to believe that we're going to be changing coordinators. Arthur Smith is under contract unless he gets a head coaching job somewhere else. Yeah, I know. Yeah, fingers crossed. Terrell Austin, I think, is under contract for at least one more year. I could be wrong, but it's just like I don't see us making a ton of changes unless there's like a mandate from up top that says, this we've been so embarrassed, you need to make changes. That's the only way it's going to happen. So, when we've been talking about quarterback, about how we have no one under contract, who the hell's lining up at running back next year? I mean, that's another huge question. Thank God this draft class has a shit ton of good, talented running backs because you can guarantee one of them's going to Pittsburgh. Najee, we didn't pick up his fifth-year option. He's a free agent. Be shocked if he's back. Someone's gonna give him an opportunity. You would think, unless they're smart, and unless they realize they can go get him in the draft, for a lot cheaper than trying to sign him as a free agent. Jalen Warren's a restricted free agent.
Thank God. Otherwise, they'd have nobody under contract.
Right. Well, and then the funny thing there is, the restricted free agent tag is not exactly cheap anymore. It's actually quite expensive to a degree. Hold on.
But he would come in at the undrafted tier, right?
Well,
So
I think you can assign a higher tender though. So the first round restricted free agent tender is right now, and this is just according to overthecap.com. So these numbers may not be accurate or may not be accurate in the future. Is like 7.2 million to pay him for a year. The second round tender is 5.2, and then the next level of tender, I think, is the right of first refusal, is 3.1. And I think you could probably get away with the latter in this case because there's going to be a lot of running backs in this draft class, and no one's going to give up money for him. So that's still like 3.1 or 3.185 million a year. I think he's shown enough to where you could actually sign him to a smaller deal and actually pay him decent money to tell him, look, we think you're going to be here a while. There are a lot of things we like that you do. At least get someone under contract. And then for the love of God, cut Cordero Patterson. Jesus Christ, I'm so fucking over that guy. Which is funny because he posted something today about how that Arthur Smith supposedly told him he wasn't good enough to hit the field anymore. And it's like, yeah, thank God he did. On Instagram.
Jalen Warren, if he was unrestricted, he'd probably get the hell out of here. Why would you want to stay in Pittsburgh if you were him after these last couple of years?
well, and especially Corey, his skill set is in a passing offense. Jalen Warren in a passing offense would be extremely useful. He's an incredible pass protector and is actually good enough, getting out with the ball in his hands if you throw it to him. But it's like that would be much better suited in a passing offense.
He should have 50 catches a year. Like, he should have so many catches because he makes guys miss in space. He has reliable hands and he can protect, except we don't.
To make a comparison to a guy that's actually still in the playoffs and had a big impact for a team yesterday to help them win, he is very similar to Austin Eckler in what he can bring to an offense. He runs extremely hard, even when his best asset looks like it may be out of the backfield in the passing game at times. It's like that Eckler has been this dual threat guy for years. You feel like Warren could do that to a degree, but like Eckler, when he takes on an excessively large load, got injuries, has slowed down a little bit. This is the draft to go get a running mate to where you can play that style of offense, where you can have guys that can do both, spell the guys. I mean, that has been the theme around the NFL, and we finally got to it at some point. Mike Tomlin used to be the run the wheels off Willie Parker route to, the guys that have followed him. I can't remember them all. Rashard Mendenhall. Fuck that guy. I hate him. Yeah, sorry. That Super Bowl will still ever live in my mind with that fumble. But just the guys that succeeded him, Najee Harris, the guys.
Le'Veon.
Yeah, Le'Veon. Yeah, the difference was he was, an incredible talent, so no one had problems with that. But
it was a team that also had Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, et al. It's like the problem with, Bell was it was a crutch that he could use, the coach could use to say, I'm willing to put the ball in his hands a million times, even though I could be attacking, I could be the Rams, what were they, this greatest show on turf if I wanted to be. But instead, I'm gonna keep all that under wraps unless we need it. Break under glass, whatever.
Until Ben needs it and goes no huddle, and that's to veil out the offense for 2-minute drill.
True.
I don't know. I'm left with they don't really have anybody at running back except for Warren, who I think is a nice number 2. They don't have anybody signed a quarterback. They have really one depth guy and one starter at defensive line, and the starter is whatever 35, 6. I don't know how old he is exactly. They have one cornerback that's a proven starter on the outside. They have a second-year player in the slot that they didn't even feel comfortable playing in the second half of the season, although I thought he played okay. They have their wide receiver room is George Pickens, who is either going to go, if you keep Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith, George Pickens is going to be insane by the time October rolls around next year. He may walk away from the team and become Antonio Brown, take his shirt off under the goalpost, fling it around like a terrible towel, and flip off the crowd as he walks off. That's where George Pickens is going to be in October or September. So you have to think really hard about maybe trying to move him. You got Roman Wilson, who never got on the train, and you have Calvin Austin. That's your wide receiver core that's under contract for next year. And as I said earlier, what wide receiver is going to want to come? You don't even know what quarterback you're going to have. The best case scenario is it's Sam Darnold, Aaron Rodgers, right? It's like I'm laughing because it's so, if you continue this path of keeping the same coaching staff and the same plan, and we're just going to have the same mindset, and maybe we're going to, rearrange a few deck chairs. What free agent wide receiver is going to come? They'd have to be somebody that has either been injured for 2 years and trying to make a comeback, or Deontay Johnson has been ostracized by the league. That's the kind of bottom of the barrel they're going to get. They have problems, man. They don't even know if they have a left tackle that can play.
Come on. If you bring in Aaron Rodgers, you're definitely getting Alan Lazard.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe Devontae Adams, too.
Those two issues now. So you just get Alan Lazard. And hey, don't worry, he'll never come off the field. So it'll be him and Pickens. You don't have to worry about the rest of the guys.
Since we're talking about free agents, I think it's only fair to run through the guys that are free agents for Pittsburgh. We've talked about the quarterback situation. Russell is a free agent. Justin Fields is a free agent. Kyle Allen is a free agent. Like Will has been saying, there is no one coming back from the quarterback
If
room.
you're keeping Arthur
Good.
Smith, I would resign
Hopefully,
Allen.
Well,
hopefully
sure.
nobody is coming back.
Yeah, right. But I'm saying I would bring Allen back if Arthur Smith is staying because you got to have that one guy in the room that understands what they're
Right,
trying.
but just for these purposes,
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
they are all free agents. We just mentioned it. Dan Moore, who has been our starting left tackle since he's been drafted, essentially, is a free agent. Fuck, don't bring that guy back. Like shit. Cam Sutton is a free agent. James Daniels is a free agent. Just all these guys are free agents. I'm not going to keep saying that. James Daniels, Dante Jackson, Van Jefferson, Najee Harris, Justin Fields, I already said him, Elandon Roberts, DeMonte Casey, Nate Herbig, CJ Henderson, Michael Pruitt, Scotty Miller, Jalen Warren is a restricted free agent, Bennett Skoranek, Max Sharping, James Pierre, Calvin Anderson, Isaiah Loudermilk, Kyle Allen, if I mentioned him, Ryan McCollum. Well, these next three are exclusive restricted, but Ryan McCollum, Jeremiah Moon, and Tyler Matakevich. I mean, I don't know about you guys. There's a lot of shit there.
I'm saying Landon Roberts is the only name you just said that I would feel kind of bad if he wasn't on the roster next year.
Yeah,
That is a sad state of affairs, man.
it really is.
Sad state of affairs. And I would add to that problem, that pile, that the two guys you're going to have to make decisions on that you almost positively need to sign an extension before the beginning of next season if you intend to keep them. George Pickens is about to become an unrestricted free agent. TJ Watt is about to become an unrestricted. Like if you're going to keep either of those guys, you're not letting them hit free agency, right? So that is some massive decision making. This is what I was saying. It's like whoever is going to be in charge of this team in the next month or two is basically going to write the story of a very indelible future.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Sorry, you talk about free agents.
I would say that TJ Watt's probably the no-brainer at this point, even though he is a 30-year-old pass rusher who's definitely dealing with his warts and stuff. I'd say I understand you need to have that conversation with George, but boy, I'd really wait till after the draft until I start working on that just to see if at least you can, at least you might exit the draft thinking, okay, I think we might have talent to supplant George Pickens, but I think I really don't think that. Just going by what this team has done in the past, where they've waited till like closer to training camp to get like negotiations going for stuff. And honestly, I don't know why George Pickens would want to sign an extension here right now either. It was very apparent that in his quote locker room talk after the game that he does not see positive progression from this offense. He is not thrilled with the direction, and he's not optimistic, as to where, Pat Fryermuth kind of said the exact opposite, but it's like he's under contract. So whatever the fuck he says, we don't really care, but that's where I would say, as far as attacking those two goes, like, I think you wait until after the draft to really start those conversations anyway.
Not to excuse the divaness, because he is a massive wide receiver diva. But if you were George Pickens, would you want to play here? Like,
that's what I was getting at. That's what
I was thinking about a free agent. The people are talking about they're going to get T. Higgins to come here. Like, come on.
It's like, well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but like, as sad as it is, especially if we don't trade up, which is a pipe dream, the best quarterback we can get in here is Sam Darnold. Justin Jefferson did not have as big of a year as he usually does.
Yeah.
And so if that's your big solution, is like, oh, Sam Darnold will get him it's Sam Darnold actually spread the ball around a little bit this year. Justin Jefferson, especially towards the back half of the season, it was the Jordan Addison show. Yeah. So that is not some like wave your hand like, oh, Sam Darnold will at least feed the stars. Like, that was what you were hoping for with Russell Wilson, and it didn't happen. So I really think, with or without George, there needs to be more talent in the receiver room, because he's either gonna get too much attention to really be able to consistently rely on being able to find him, and that's ignoring having a quarterback to hit him and an OC and all that stuff. You just need more talent at the receiver room to have a respectable passing offense.
I mean,
And
I think okay. Here's the thing, Corey. You can correct me if you disagree, but one of the ways that you end up with a deep receiving core is that you have a quarterback that people want to, can imagine delivering the ball to people, and an offensive system that you can imagine thriving in if you're a wide receiver, because then that means, your guys that you already have on your team you drafted want to stay, and the guys who are free agents that you have a chance to get are going to be interested in coming. Like you guys are, I mean, this whole show we're essentially making the argument for why a coaching change in particular, and probably an ownership change and a coaching change, has to happen for anything to change. It has to happen because the dominoes that we're talking about are totally convoluted and impossible as long as you keep the first two things in place. If they don't change a coach and they don't change ownership, none of this other stuff is going to change. Quickly, going back to TJ Watt, and you said it's no-brainer to sign him. Of course, the talent is there. Dude is going to get $40 million a year. So you're going to sign a player for $40 million a year who just came off of, like a stretch at the end of the season where he didn't even show up on the score sheet, which is partially, I'm sure, because of the injuries that he was accumulating throughout the year. And I don't hold him being injured against him. He was trying to carry the whole team. But, Nick Bosa got 2 years ago, averaged 34 million, right? So, I mean, I think the TJ Watt deal is going to be the all-time record for a defensive player, and it's probably going to stay that way until Myles Garrett signs the following year. I suspect that's a $40 million a year deal. So you're going to have the highest paid defensive player in the league to do what? To not be able to stop anybody in the postseason, to not slow down a top quarterback, to be on a team that doesn't have a chance to go anywhere. That to me is not a no-brainer.
That's
It's
fair.
at least an argument of like, should you do the right thing for TJ Watt and ship him somewhere? But he just said today how much he wants to be here and he wants to win it for Cam, and he's delusional as well. So
I do have a quick question before we kind of shift topics, or we'll stay on it. But just if you are a draftable receiver, let's just say you're Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, or you're Luther Burden, or something like that. If you're in that meeting room with the Steelers, do you think you're giving your best interview and you're super locked in and trying to impress, or do you
yeah,
think
I don't really watch any film. Yeah, I don't know, man. I
Phil,
like to play
what's
video
that?
games and shit. Yeah.
Call of Duty just came out, bro. Do you see my prestige ranking? Yeah.
like, and I'm telling you, like, these college guys, their agents are just gonna say, "Oh, you have a meeting with the Steelers." Like, hey, listen, we're gonna take it, but you don't have to. Don't worry about this one. Like, you can just use this one as practice. Like, it's I have. There's no reason for it. Now, if you're a running back, that's a different story. I'm sure Travion Henderson's gonna try and have the interview of his life for the Steelers, but any of these receivers, especially the ones in the first two rounds, I see no incentive for them to, be on their best behavior.
I mean, in the same sense, you'd think that way as a running back too now, though. Like, I understand the offensive scheme is like designed for you, but if your agent is any good and has looked at what Pittsburgh's trying to do running the ball this year with both tackles pulling in the wrong directions, and like our offensive line coach is pretty much gone. Like his contract's up, I believe. So it's like you find it very hard to believe that he's going to be back. If he's back, just give me a gun now, and I'll off myself. Sorry, that's a bad joke. But it's just like even if you're a running back right now, we haven't even been able to make holes for our running backs. Like most of the runs this year have come off of just talent alone. And like it's not like we've had the most talented backfield this year, either.
What was our farthest run this year, or our longest run? Like, it couldn't have been that long. Nothing that I
I think
recall is
Najee had a 37-yarder, I think, off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
burners.
Yeah, I think it was against the Raiders. So
Yeah, I'm going to look and see if I can dig it up while we're talking. By the way, there is one. Well, you mentioned one thing that may attract someone worthwhile. Offensive line coach, position coach for the Steelers. I could see that being, the kind of coach who likes the challenge and sees the talent. It's like, hey, you got talent, and they just
Yes.
need a coach to, upgrade them. And I'll look really good if I come in here. Like you could get somebody to parlay that into a head coaching job if that's the kind of path they're on. So it would
But
because if you go in there and you make the offensive line for the Steelers look you know bulletproof, you could probably write a ticket, after that. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
you're walking into Fatanu, Broderick, who we said from the start, and I wasn't like, as a prospect, I wasn't the biggest fan of Broderick. However, I said he's a ball of clay. If he's developed the tools to be a really good tackler there. Well, we're 2 years, it's 2 years now, right? We're sitting here 2 years later, and he arguably has regressed since his first couple games. So there's talent there. There's talent with Fatanu. You've got two rookies who Frazier played really well. He received all pro votes. McCormick, from what I saw, had, up and down season, but definitely talented and has a lot more promise than I think someone like Daniels, obviously. And then you've got Samala, who's sitting there at the other guard spot, who's still on contract. It's like, that's you could walk in next year, and if you put in work with those guys, you turn Broderick into average, you turn Fatanu into a good, good player. Frazier takes a step up to elite. All of a sudden, you're looking at a really good O line. But so that's one thing where I think Will's right. Now, I don't know, I could see Arthur Smith having his paw prints on that offensive line as well, and that could be kind of a deterrent in that because from what I understand, Arthur Smith is an O-line guy, kind of by trade. But I mean, our O-line could be as good as we want, and if Sam Darnold and Calvin Austin's our number 2 wide receiver, it's not going to matter at all. So it's how much can you do with what we have?
Yeah. But sorry.
Oh, by the way, so confirming 36 yards was the Steelers' longest run from scrimmage this year, not just
Yeah.
And Arthur Smith, he was an offensive lineman and team captain.
Yeah. Well, so
At
we've been talking
Georgetown
a lot about
preparatory.
our offensive woes. Let's flip to the other side of the ball because it's just as bare there right now, unfortunately. Our defensive line has gone from a pride thing in Pittsburgh to being an utter laughingstock. Like Cameron Hayward is the only defensive lineman that was worth a shit this year. Like I think we all had really high hopes for Keanu Benton, and he didn't come anywhere close to the player we thought he could step up and be in year 2. Like I certainly thought, because like rookie year, Benton looked pretty good. Like he looked pretty good. And I thought, boy, with a true offseason where a guy can finally get a rest, because let's face it, rookies have like the longest exposure to football of any probably professional player across any professional sport league, because they play a full college season. They go right into interviews and workouts. They get drafted. They go right into rookie camp. Then they go to mini camp. Then they're in training camp and play a whole nother year. I thought, boy, he's going to have an off season to like kind of finally get his feet under him, like bulk up, maybe just get better. And I didn't feel like any of that happened. So just very disappointed in his play. For the most part this year. He really didn't even have splash plays this year. And I think that was the big regression was as a rookie, he made splash plays. And this year he really didn't do that many of those. So he was a disappointment. But then Larry Ogunjobi, good for the love of God. That dude is such a waste of money. It's unreal. He's one of the first cuts I do. You can save $7 million by cutting him. Isaiah Loudermilk, I mentioned, is a free agent. He actually played okay at times this year. I'm not going to rail a backup defensive lineman for as little as he played with how bad the parts were around him. Montrevious Adams, injured for most of the year, barely played. Dean Lowry, kind of in the same thing. Signed him, barely played because he was injured. And then who are some of felt like there's someone I'm missing here. DeMarvin Leal, who supposedly had a very good training camp, got injured, didn't play at all. I said, I said very good, and I didn't say great. Uh, but it's like that's your defensive line. You're gonna hang your hat on. It's just bad, and then just bad.
I mean,
So bad.
you mentioned that that you felt like the previous year's rookie didn't get better this year in terms of Keanu Benton, but I would say the same. I mean, in a way, I thought that Nick Herbig and Darnell Washington actually played pretty well this year. So and Broderick Jones seemed to recover a little bit from whatever was ailing him earlier in the year and got a little better. But I'm not sure. I think that the defensive rookies, Joey Porter and Corey Trice, even and Keanu Benton, really got better.
I was working my way to the backfield.
Right, but I'm just saying in terms of that's an interesting point you make though, because I do think that the development of players that we were just saying we don't feel like the offensive line is getting developed, and if it's also true that the defensive line and the defensive backfield is also not getting developed, that's a problem.
Yeah, so I mean, let's just dive right in. I thought our outside linebacking group played pretty good this year for the most part. Like that was the one bright shining shite for this team. Alex Smith was pretty good for most of the year. There were times, he was injured for a good portion of the year, so he missed I think it was 5 games in the middle of the year, and then maybe another 2 after re-aggravating something. So he didn't have a full year. We all saw how banged up TJ Watt was down the stretch. Like you said, didn't register a single statistic in the last 4 games he played. Nick Herbig was a nice little find this year. I'm not saying he was great by any means, but as like your third rusher, he brought the juice. He made pressures. I think he got 5 or 6 sacks on the year for a guy who, was called on to do spot stuff. And then honestly, when we signed Preston Smith, I was very happy about that signing. He actually played pretty well for us down the stretch. Unfortunately, he's going to be a cap casualty. He's worth 13.4 against the cap. There's no way we're going to pay him anywhere close to that. He probably feels like he can probably go sign somewhere too, since he's a true free agent now and might actually get to play more. So I doubt he's back in Pittsburgh, even though I kind of liked him as a nickel D tackle in our pass rushing packages. And, he's just nice to have an extra, like a 4th outside linebacker for when we needed it. Just with all the injuries we dealt with this year, that ended up being a much better signing than I thought it would. Linebacking wise, boy, Patrick Queen was a disappointment. We've kind of covered that a little bit, just how poor he played at times.
Was that hard to see coming? I remember
we were all on board with that.
We were all in our group chat saying, "Boy, that's bad." It was that's when I had access to all the stats, all the EPA stats, and I'm just like, "Boy, it would be really hard for this to work out." Looking at how he's played.
Yeah, and then we relied a lot on Peyton Wilson this year, rookie, who I actually thought played okay. For being a rookie, kind of thrown into this defense. He made some splash plays, didn't make plays other times. I think it's hard to make plays when your defensive line is as bad as Pittsburgh's was this year. So I'm willing to give the rookie a free pass. God, I love Landon Roberts. I think he's the one free agent. Will and I kind of talked about it before we got on, but he's probably the only free agent we'd be willing to bring back because that's a hard-nosed guy who knows what football's about, and he's a good locker room guy. You'll probably get him back pretty cheap. As he actually said earlier in the season that he would love to retire in Pittsburgh. So I think if he wants back, he'll be back. Mark Robinson's a career special teams guy. He's never made an impact on defense.
It was very good on special teams this year, though, I will say.
Yeah, very good on special teams. I don't want to knock that, but I just meant from a defensive standpoint.
Well, their off-ball, their inside linebacker situation is a mess because even if they resign Landon Roberts, they have guys that can play, but they don't. The roles for them don't really match one another. They're not complementary to one another, right? Yes. So Patrick Queen is, as I said when he was signed, and I'll reiterate it now that you've seen him play a whole year. I think you're going to agree with me, or listening to the show than you might have back then. He is he would be not as good a buck linebacker as a Landon Roberts is playing downhill against the run, whatever, being, your aggressive leader. But he's that's the job that he's actually suited for. Being a coverage linebacker and wearing the green dot and keeping everything organized and getting all the calls right and everything is not the gig for him. But that's the gig that we gave him. And since you
Mhm.
signed up to the bigger money contract, they expect him to play and be on the field every down. Peyton Wilson is the guy that actually probably fits that role a little bit better,
Mhm.
especially, eventually once he gets his feet wet in the NFL and get a chance to start somewhere. And then you have Cole Holcomb, who,
Yeah.
if he were 100%, which we assume that he's not, if he were 100%, he's actually the best guy for that job. He's better than either Peyton Wilson or anything that Patrick Queen has shown his entire career as far as being a MAC linebacker. So if Cole Holcomb can redo his deal, make it more incentive laden so that if he ends up being the player that he was, he still gets paid. But if not, you haven't really cost yourself anything. I would totally bring him back. Landon Roberts, I think, is a must sign, or else they won't be able to stop any running game next year, let alone the Baltimore Ravens. And to me, I once again, if you move on from Mike Tomlin, I think you're moving on from Patrick Queen as well. I think that's a no-brainer for me, is that you could probably get something for him because there
Mhm.
is still a demand for guys like that. But I feel like all he does right now is stand in the way of Peyton Wilson or Cole Holcomb playing in front of him.
Yeah, and you bring up the Cole Holcomb contract right now. He's set to count like 7.5 million against the official number is like 7.64 or whatever. Thing is, if you cut him, you get 6 million. So in a year, I don't know what we'd really go after, what we're looking for in free agency, but that 6 million number might be very enticing just to cut him. Not nothing against him because I actually really liked him when he played for us 2 years ago now. Just a horrific injury is what really sidelined his progress. We really liked what he brought to the field. He was able to do everything we wanted. He was probably the first guy since for Ryan Shazier that could actually drop back and run with guys in coverage and affect plays. And I'm not saying he was great at it, but at least he could do it as where and has a feel for it, as where these other guys have not had that. Maybe Peyton Wilson develops in more into that, as his career. Cause I mean, he made a great interception against Baltimore. I think the first time we played them, kind of off a ricochet just by being in the right spot. So I think it comes down to there is, if Queen is still around and you want to re-sign Landon and you want Peyton Wilson to play more, I just don't know how you keep Holcomb just
Yeah.
because of the cap hit. But
I
who?
mean,
But
just
who knows?
Holcomb, at full health. This is an asterisk, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Holcomb at full health for 7.8 a year, whatever it was, versus Queen at 10 million a year. It's a no-brainer. Like, you're
Sure.
getting so much more for 7.8 million a year. This is why I say I'm not painting a target on Patrick Queen. There are bigger problems on defense,
Mm-hmm.
but I just feel like that is just like not a very good signing, and it apparently was a signing that was about Mike Tomlin's, lust over the player since the time he was a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
So once again, what does this bring us back to?
Right. And then just there's the unpredictability of whether he can be that player again. So like you said, maybe if you rework his deal and do an incentive laden deal, he can be back under that. But right now I just have a hard time doing that. Considering the money you're gonna have to spend on a quarterback potentially if you actually do go after one, even if it's Russell Wilson. We've said it, he's gonna cost at least 35 to 40 million a year to bring him back.
I,
Whether it's for one or three or two or what. So
here's my question. That number keeps getting thrown around. Who else is paying Russell Wilson next year? Like, who are we bidding against?
yeah, I get it. I was
I wonder. I'm sure there's some idiot team that is, but like, who else is trying to pay Russell Wilson? Let alone 35, 40, but 30 million. Who else is giving
The
him
the
30 million?
Raiders, if the Raiders don't get one of the first two guys off the board at quarterback, I would say would sign Russell Wilson in a heartbeat. Like, that'd be a big upgrade for them.
right, but
Over Sam Darnold?
Sam Darnold is going to go to Sam Darnold, as you said, being the best looking girl at the dance, despite the fact that, the best homely looking girl at the dance is probably going to have a better landing spot than the Raiders, I would think. I would like, would you be surprised if Miami signed Sam Darnold? Like Miami
I'm
kind of fits there,
surprised.
comes from the, same system. They had success with it there in Minnesota. Their quarterback has had at minimum health problems and also performance problems. So I'm saying Sam Darnold could get a little more creative solution to where he ends up. But yeah, Russell Wilson, I still think, somebody wants that placeholder quarterback and who has that little bit of like, leadership quality. You're willing to overlook some of the flaws. Like think about the Jets last year, like or whenever they signed Aaron Rodgers. Like they were so desperate for that kind of vibe that, look what they did to get it. Look what the Browns did to get Deshaun Watson in the middle of all his trouble and everything else. There'll be somebody out there who's willing to give him, at like we said, at least 35 million if he's gonna be the starter. So I would feel the bidding that you're really doing is against Russell Wilson's opinion about how much he's worth and should be paid. That's what you're bidding against.
Yeah. I think the other thing, since we're on Russell again, it's like, how much does he want to stay in Pittsburgh and play for Tomlin? Because I feel like those two are almost a perfect fit for one another. Like,
Really,
unfortunately, like,
it's like having a coach on the field
mm-hmm,
who thinks exactly the same way about offense.
right.
Anyway,
So, but I'm not saying that. I mean, right now, I think Russell Wilson is the guy we sign. I really do. I'd be shocked if it's not, because there were at least times this year where you saw if we ran an up tempo offense, he could actually still sling the ball around a little bit. I'm not saying a lot, just enough to make us competitive. And I think that's the thing at the end of the day, Mike Tomlin's going to fall back on. And it's like, well, when the offense worked, Russell Wilson was playing well.
I have a question. It's what game? How many games had Russell Wilson started when we had that one Bengals game, like the only 300-yard game of the season? How many games into that, into him starting, was that?
He was like the fourth or fifth.
So right around the end of that, we always say backup QBs get around 4 or 5 games, then they kind of revert back to pumpkins. That's usually what we always say about these guys, especially when we're picking. It's like, other than that one game against a bad defense, like a really, really, really bad defense, what else? Like there was nothing. Like he came out with a little fire at the beginning. I'll give him that. The backup, and I'm gonna think of that as like the backup fire. Like that's your backup comes out and they teams don't know what to do with them for a couple weeks, and then they get figured out. After that Bengals game, what did we see to want him back? I feel like I'm losing my mind here.
I just think you see enough at times to think that, I don't know, if you surround him with better talent, he can at least do more with it. At least him over Justin Fields. At least he knew where to go with the ball more, and like, I don't know, he knew when to throw it away some of the time. Yeah, but you get what I'm saying though. Like we infinitely felt better with Russell Wilson leading this offense than Justin Fields, because at least Russell Wilson could make the passing game pop a little bit, as to where with Justin Fields is very few and far between with him.
I will go out on a limb. If the Steelers sign either Russ Wilson or Justin Fields and they keep Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith, there's they're going to win 7 games or fewer next year. I know that you guys made fun of me a couple years ago because I was like, man, Kenny Pickett, no way. But even cobbling together games tougher, they're playing the NFC North. So there's 3 games there that they'll be heavily underdogs in. They're playing Buffalo, another game that there's like almost no shot. And then they have 2 teams in their division that are better than them.
Yeah.
So
I would much rather, and I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I would much rather sign Aaron Rodgers than Russell Wilson or Fields, because again, like it's something new. Like it's something Now with Sam Darnold, you're gonna get roped up in a couple years where you don't want to be strapped to that contract for the amount of years he's gonna want, assuming he even wants to sign here. Aaron Rodgers, at least, like you could at least pretend to you could at least pretend to be like, okay, Super Bowl run this year, next year. If you go with Fields or Wilson or any of the others, there's just no way that you can try and tell me that they think they're a Super Bowl team with what they had in the room. That there's just no way that, especially if Sam Darnold loses tonight, like you can't tell me that if they had Sam Darnold, they're a Super Bowl team. And it's like if we had, to what Jeremy said, we had weapons around Wilson. I don't know what our avenue to add weapons is. It's a weak receiving class. No receivers are signed here. There's a million running backs, but running backs in general do not matter in today's NFL. It's you see what the Giants did with Barkley for how many years. I don't know. It's just Rodgers. It's for me, and I don't even want Rodgers. But that's like if you're gonna sign a guy, just he's number one in my eyes, at least because you're not getting strapped down to a super long contract.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was what I felt about this year, that I was so grateful that they had the two quarterbacks only on 1 year contracts.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was like, gave you the opportunity to like do it now. You like bite the bullet, change any asset that you can change into putting yourself in a position to get a quarterback this year in the draft. As it turned out, some of the guys lost their luster from last year to this year, and a couple of the guys that I thought would be worth taking middle to late first round did not come out. So, that puts you in that position. If you want to get wide receiver talent, we discussed it. The way you do it is you get yourself an offensive coach and a quarterback that can actually play, and then wide receivers will come to you. If you build it, they will come. If you don't build it, they're not coming.
Yep. It's very, very true. Well, let's kind of revert back to the kind of last position group on defense. We didn't really talk about as much from a roster standpoint. Donta Jackson, he is gone. He's a free agent, but the only guys you really have under contract are Joey Porter Jr., Corey Trice, Beanie Bishop, Minka Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott, which was the signing of the offseason, by the way. That guy was freaking phenomenal. I will be the first one to say that when we signed him, I thought, boy, that doesn't really move the needle much. I could not have been more wrong.
Give me a whole defensive of Landon Roberts and Deshaun Elliott's, man. I'm going to win.
Dude, for real. And then Ryan Watts, who had an injury, who didn't play all year because of it. Not a lot of confidence in that group right now. With just how far Minka has fallen off from where he was a few years ago. He's just not the playmaker that he used to be. And I think a lot of it is we're playing him out in.
But listen, man, he'd be really great for playing for Penn State. He should be playing for Penn State right now because he lines up in State College.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like he's so far away from the action. It's a joke. Like I said, Deshaun Elliott, signing of the offseason, great addition. Love everything you want. Joey Porter Jr., hate to say it, a little bit of a sophomore slump. Was very grabby this year.
The holding flags that we predicted from his college play reared their head this year.
Yeah, that showed up. Beanie Bishop, I'll tell you what, played pretty well for us this year when we let him play. Over Cam Sutton. And then I'm kind of torn on Corey Trice Jr. I felt like he got a little bit of exposed, but at the same time, he's barely been able to play as is. He had a rough first starting in Cincinnati, but it is what it is.
I don't think I'm as low on this group as it sounds like you two are. I think the predictability of the defense really didn't help these guys a whole lot. And I think I would actually, Donta Jackson is the second guy where, like, if you told me we were signing him back, in addition to bringing in another corner, I'd be pretty fine with that. I would like another guy at least to press him for that number 2 spot. And at least you have 2 guys to kind of bounce in and out. I think part of the issue is we didn't run that much man this year. And I said this, it's the same thing as the Patrick Queen rant that I had. It's like Patrick Queen's actually atrocious in zone, pretty good in man coverage. He's a really good blitzer. And I said this, this defense could be really, really good with the guys they brought in if they go man heavy, which they already have the personnel for, and they blitz a lot, which they didn't do either of. And so it's the same thing where it's like with Dante Jackson, he didn't play. I mean, we've seen bad cornerback play, and I don't think he was at that level. Like, we've seen bad cornerback play over the last couple of years. And
I mean, just quickly, I like the guys who are under contract. I actually like. I think that's a nice, group. You can add to that and make something out of it. But the Dante Jackson thing, I'm sorry. In the beginning of the year, I think he played pretty well. Since midseason, let me give you some sobering numbers. He ranks 78th out of 79 corners who played 150 snaps or more in both overall grades, so that's coverage and play in the run game. And he was also next to last in coverage grade. This is PFF, so take it with a grain of salt. But I do think you can look at the results and the tape and see that his coverage was very bad in the second half of the season. Is one of the reasons their defense really declined. And the other part I'll say to that is if you looked at him in this, even in just the most recent game, man, he sure looked like he was avoiding having to tackle anybody or making any contact, and it looked like a guy who was thinking about his next contract, and maybe that next contract's not here. So anyway, Korey, I'll let you can tell me that you appreciate him more, and maybe it is true that he fits in with the group that they're doing, but
I will say I do just like Corey Trice. I think that in his flashes, he's a really good guy to have developing and available. That's definitely a guy where that's not one that you just thrust into a starting spot, but I could see him taking a starting spot towards the middle of next year, even in minicamp, if it's that good. If he comes out and he's just balling out like that. I don't think there's any way you can justify paying a quarterback a good chunk of money compared to a lot of the other issues you have, or drafting a corner in the first 3 rounds. So you're going to kind of have to figure out with the guys that you have around there. Hopefully Ryan, I was a big fan of Ryan Watts coming out. Not that that's a guy you can bank on, but that guy being pretty good with, Corey Trice makes a leap. Ryan Watts, is pretty solid. Beanie Bishop can handle the slot. It's like you're actually not looking too bad, because I'm pretty sure Corey Trice graded out pretty well in a lot of those,
Okay.
PFF stuff.
And I'll be honest here, maybe I need to clarify. I guess it's just, the way the season ended has just left a sore taste in my mouth, just kind of across the whole team. But from a talent perspective alone, you are right. It's actually a unit that you look at and say, man, this is a group that could be pretty good. But I do feel like that second corner is either going to need to be drafted, or you sign someone who's actually going to compete and actually be there for it. And I understand it'll probably cost some good money, but it's that's why Joey Porter's on, will only be entering the 3rd year of a rookie deal. You don't have to pay him for another 2 years. And Beanie Bishop is a rookie slot, and we don't pay slot corners anyway. So why the hell would that matter?
The secondary, you definitely have something to work with there. And
John Elliott is on a crazy cheap deal for his impact.
I mean, just getting rid of Cam Sutton and probably Dante Jackson. Sorry, Korey, cover your ears.
I'm not a super fan.
It's just the tackling. It's just his tackling. He had probably the most missed tackles on the team. It's just a combination of things that don't really bode well for the future if you keep him. But I just feel like you could make that a significantly better unit by better scheme and by adding a couple of key guys. So compared to some of the other position groups we talked about, it's in pretty good shape. They need a guy or two, but that's not the same as your whole unit's a mess.
It's actually when you kind of zoom out, especially if they bring back a Landon, and it's been really negative podcast for good reason. But if you zoom out, they've got a defensive backfield that, with one more little addition, looks like it could be pretty good, especially it's really more of a coaching thing on that end, I think. Linebackers with the Landon Roberts. Yeah. D-line, you're old. You probably need to add at least one guy. But, like, you could justify, especially with cutting Preston Smith and Larry Ogunjobi, there's going to be self-created money to go and get a guy at the
Devon
D-line.
Hargrave's a free agent.
Yeah, like there's going to be a guy. And Keanu Benton, I think, is a number 3 or that's like the third D tackle out of your 2 starters. I think that's kind of where he was more as a rookie. That might be, that might add a boost to that. You still got your edge rushers, Highsmith and Water, and go anywhere. Defense isn't that far off from looking bad. And then, O-line, you really can't draft a guy early. It's if it's me, I wouldn't shy away from drafting a tackle. I really am not I don't think Broderick has it. But, with what they have, they're not going to draft a guy early. You have the number 1 receiver. Running back, you could fill in the 7th round. You're probably going to fall into a 1,000-yard rusher with this class. It's like this team isn't that far off personnel-wise when you kind of scope out of it, except you don't have a QB. You don't have an avenue to get a QB. And the coaching at all levels is just so far from Super Bowl caliber that none of it matters. None of it's even close.
But here's the thing: the talent defense, you're not far from having a really talented group with some stars and whatever. But even with all those guys, they get killed. They did you miss the last month of the season? Is it only coaching? Okay, coaching was huge, but was it only coaching? I think at some point you just have to say, all right, the guys are not even, winning one-on-one matchups the way that they need to in order to be. And maybe it was just like one thing led to another and this cascading problems at the end of the season, like a patient that starts, like an elderly patient that gets sick with one thing and then it cascades and before you know it, they're on life support. But I'm not convinced 100% that if they just changed the coaching and didn't change really much in terms of personnel and defense, that they'd be that much better, enough better on defense to win a Super Bowl. I feel like that's still a reach.
I'll say this: I thought the Bengals were going to 40 bomb us, and we kind of kept those guys in check. It's as bad as the Ravens ran all over us. 28 points for an NFL offense should be attainable.
Yeah, they took their foot off the gas though. It's like the only reason they had 28 was because they didn't want to get more. But I feel like you not only couldn't stop the run, you couldn't even slow it down on a team with an all-pro defensive tackle, a Pro Bowl, probably should have been all-pro edge rusher, an elite run-stopping linebacker, a pretty dang good free safety and strong safety, and you still could not stop that team from running the football on you. I think you need some new people. Especially that defensive line thing is no small thing. That to me is a bigger issue than just adding a guy. I feel like they got to add multiple guys in order to get to a point where they could rely on that defense to stop anybody.
I will. One thing that is a benefit is that I have been banging on the table for us to draft a 320 plus pounder to go sit his ass in the A gap for 3 years now. That if you just add a guy like that, probably makes it a whole lot easier on the linebackers and Cam Hayward and Benton and all these other guys, just because do that bit. The Ravens have like 3 of those kinds of guys. The Eagles have 2 of those kinds of guys where they just eat up the middle. It's like, I think the one thing that's always kind of thrown me off with this defense is we try and play this bend don't break defense, which when you think about the philosophy behind bend don't break is all your guys are doing the right thing. They do it right over and over again, and the margins get tighter in the red zone. And that's something where it's like you got all the white kids on a basketball team. It's like, we got to make all the right passes and we got to do all this right. And it's like, everything's got to be perfect. And then, that's how the team of all white basketball players ends up winning. But when you have a couple dudes who can go out and get their bucket every play, you got to sometimes just let those guys loose. Just kind of just orient your defense around those guys. Don't just line TJ Watt up in the same spot over and over. It's like, get, creative and get aggressive and kind of like you play full court press, make the white kids figure out a way to dribble past you. It's like all this stuff. It's like when you got the athletes, no offense to any white people listening to this, it's, you play basketball. I'm sure you've seen this a couple times. It's like when you've got players, let them go play. You don't try and, make them part of the system. Sometimes you got to let the player be above, even in a game like football. It's like Myles Garrett, you see what they do with him sometimes, and it's not like the Cleveland Browns are, have Bill Welsh over there. It's just not that hard sometimes. And it's something where I think being more aggressive blitzing, it's like you can't chip TJ Watt if 7 guys are coming. You can't. There's going to be someone on the quarterback in a second. It's like stuff like that's going to make it easier, but it sacrifices the bend don't break identity, which I think collectively brings your talent that you have and you've paid for down a little bit.
I just feel like the simple things extremely well. They've taken this mantra to heights that are like way beyond it. It's elevated to like a way of life instead of, oh yeah, this is something that we need to, make sure we do all the little things right. Instead, it's like their defense, they decided they should just make it as simple as possible and execute it perfectly, and that's the way to succeed as a defense. Same, I mean, more or less the same with offense, but man, that is such a lazy way of coaching to your talent,
I think about the daunting Patriots defense from their extended dynasty. How many dudes did they have on that defense? Like, it was rare, and if they had a guy, they probably traded him. Like that system, because of the coaching, is probably the greatest defensive mind in NFL history. That worked for them. But what we're seeing with the Steelers is like, you got the athletes, you got the guys to go out and play. And what you're doing is you're doing the same thing that these teams with less talent do. And it's just, you never move Highsmith, who is a good player. I don't want to dismiss him. He didn't have a great statistical year, but he's a good player. TJ Watt, phenomenal player. Minka, when you line him back 25 yards every time, of course it's going to be a down year. Like, what do you want him to do? It's maybe he did regress, maybe he didn't. But the fact that we can't tell, it's just kind of telling. I don't know. That's one thing that's kind of it bugged me because I got this idea at the start of the year when we signed Queen. I'm like, man, him and Alandon, if we're blitzing all the time, we got these 2 outside man corners. Like, we could really go at teams like this. Like, this could be a ticket to how you beat Lamar. You pack the box on him, make him be quick outside. Same thing to Mahomes. Like, dude's injured half the time come playoffs. Hard for him to escape a blitz. It's like he might get the ball out fast, but if you've got guys playing, press defense, it's going to be hard. But no, we're going to sit back and cover 3, play soft cloud, soft cover 3 for entire stretches. And we're just going to get carved up in that. And then they're still going to run the ball on us with an extra man in the box.
Yeah. So since we're kind of talking about defensive schemes, I want to throw a question to you guys. I know like the days of the true 3-4 are done for the most part because no one plays 3 down linemen for the most part. But we're still evaluating like we're playing the 3-4, and we haven't really played a 3-4 in years. We've our base defense is Watt and Highsmith on the outside acting as, let's face it, pass rushing specialists at this point because they're not big enough to play defensive end in a true 4-3. And then the guys on our interior, Cameron Hayward's been great. And when we had Stephon Tuitt, it worked. But I feel, we've been drafting 3-4 ends and asking them to play D tackles for the most part. So I guess my question to you guys is it time to like officially declare a true move to the 4-3 and just go all in on the 4-3, or revert back to the 3-4? Because let's face it, it did work, and we can do some different things with that to make it work. I think with the personnel we have. Korey, go ahead.
I just don't think you can revert back to a 3-4 when teams don't run. The teams will spread you out. Like if you roll in, because it's a personnel game. So I'll give you this. If you want to call it a 3-4 and you want to bring in, I don't think he declared for the draft, but Jack Henderson is my teammate at Southeastern Louisiana. He was about 6'3", 225, cut up, and played with the mentality of a linebacker, played with the aggression of a linebacker, but could run like a safety. And so he was that outside linebacker that would play to the field side where you would more often than not see the extra receivers. And he would play like a 3-4 outside. And I say this because we played a 3 front. He would play like a 3-4 outside linebacker, except in reality, he's a safety that could cover the flats, could cover the hook curls, all that stuff, could fly back and, cover the middle of the field if he had to because he had some speed. It's like, if you want to call it a 3-4, but have an outside guy playing the field like that, sure, go ahead.
Well,
But
you just described, by the way, Troy Polamalu and what's the guy with Baltimore, Hamilton, right?
Cal Hamilton, yeah.
Like
yeah,
that's a perfect playmaker position. But you have to draft someone like that. Like,
yeah, you have to invest that. I make Mike Sainer still. I screamed from the rafters for us to draft him, begged us for him to draft him. He's succeeding as an outside corner, which was his one-on-one coverage was arguably his worst ability. And so it's like, if you want to call it a 3-4 and you do something like that, I'm fine with it. I don't really care what they do. If it helps them stop the run, go ahead. But you got to have the personnel for it.
Mm-hmm.
If they were switching back to a 3-4 and you say, okay, we're going to put a Landon Roberts and Patrick Queen at the 2 middle spots, and we're going to put Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt on the edge. Oh shit, we're just going to get spread out to the sideline, and they're going to run bubble screens on us over and over again until the score's about 35-0. Mm-hmm. So they can if they want, but they're going to have to invest in that type of player, which I've been begging us to invest in. I've been begging for a slot corner that's built like a safety. I've been saying that college is ahead of the curve on it for 3 years now, but it's
positionless football. That's the thing
yeah.
that, that's supposed to be the thing, right? So you got some cats like your Kyle Hamiltons of the world who can do a lot of different things, and you mix that up with a couple of big bodies that play like badasses, and you can build quite a lot from that.
Yeah,
Just quickly talking about the talent, like maybe they just need more talent or whatever. I harken back once again. I'm sorry, Steelers fans. I harken back once again to the Jaguars Steelers divisional playoff game. The defense on that team had Joe Hayden, Javon Hargrave, Cameron Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, Vince Williams, Bud Dupree, and TJ Watt. Okay, so that team, coached by Mike Tomlin in the playoffs, could not stop Jacksonville. So maybe it really isn't the talent as much as it is what you do with them or how you get them ready to play or whatever. I don't know. It's like they had their whole defense lined up to try to stop the run from Baltimore and gave up 300 yards on the ground. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that. I wish that they had talent to run either scheme, but more importantly, I wish that they had a change in coaching and coaching philosophy so they could do better with it.
Gotcha. So real quick before we kind of really put a ribbon on this season and, the thoughts we've had, that we're going to see chase into the offseason here. We've mentioned, we probably wouldn't bring anyone back. We'd cut a few people other than, we'd like to see a Landon back. Some notable cuts probably coming to clear up some cap space. We're probably going to sign a quarterback to at least a semi-market deal. I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm just saying it's likely.
I was putting my thumbs down for anyone not on the video, and Will's hands were covering his face.
Mm-hmm. With that being said, let's say we do have to pay a quarterback 35 to 40 million, right? I've been running the over the cap calculator kind of on cap space, projected cap space, and what we'd have available. We would have 41 million available if we take the high number at quarterback. If we're paying a guy 40 million to come play here next year, what position do we need to throw it at the most? And do you have someone in mind? I will tackle this first because judging by the silence, you guys didn't have answers really quickly. So that's totally fine because I kind of do. I do feel like a defensive tackle worth his salt would be worth it. And the guy that immediately popped in my mind, because you saw him play yesterday and he looks good. He's not a starter, but he would be if he came here. But if I could get Milton Williams out of Philadelphia, I would sprint and pay him probably what's going to be in the realm of a 4-year, $60 million deal to get him to come play here because like I said, I did my research on this. I threw this question to the guys, not really knowing what if they had looked that far ahead. I'm addicted, so I did. He's only going to be like 25. I think he'll turn 26 later this offseason. But it's like you can get that guy in the prime of his career. He's lightning quick. He's good against the run. He can rush the passer. He is that do-it-all defensive type lineman that would really help the Steelers out in a multitude of ways. So I kind of fell on defense. I felt like there are some decent guys at defensive tackle with him being my top one. But defensive tackle would kind of be where I go. Other guys I might consider in a lesser role, Tershawn Wharton for the Chiefs has actually developed into a very nice player. He's actually been really good for them this year. Came in as an undersized, small school kid out of some southeast middle state, Missouri, whatever school, and has actually played extremely well for them. Has been able to rush the passer. Kind of in a similar role. And Milton Williams, not quite the run defender, but he's been very good. Other than that, I'll let you guys kind of take it from here if you're ready.
I mean, you hit it pretty well for me. I just quickly, I'll let Korey spend most of the time. One name that's kind of interesting to me is Tre'Davious White. I know he has injury problems, but okay, perfect example of what I was saying earlier. Like somebody who's coming off some injuries and trying to, get a prove it deal or whatever that you might be able to get in the building. That would be a guy that would, if you have him at, 95% of what he was, that's a nice, that's a nice pairing for Joey Porter Jr.
Yeah. Okay.
What was your name, Will?
Tre'Davious White.
Okay. I could see that. We love our former pedigree guys.
We do. We really, really
Absolutely
do. Which
yeah.
that since it looks like you're still looking real quick. One name that I kind of saw. Okay, go ahead.
You can go ahead though. You can go ahead though.
Well, one guy whose name kind of surprised me that he was on the list, but I guess it doesn't. Baron Browning for Arizona. Not that it's like at a super position of need. He has been relegated to like a backup role in Arizona. And boy, I think that was a guy that we were all extremely high on and actually played very well as a rookie. And if I was doing some bottom of the roster type moves, I would definitely be bringing Baron Browning over, especially considering honestly the injuries that Watt and Highsmith had this year. It's even more apparent that we need, as many edge rushers as we possibly can, the way our scheme is currently constructed. He's a guy that, honestly, I thought played pretty good for Denver. I didn't even realize he was in Arizona, and he's played sparingly there. Only like 21 tackles, 2 sacks on the year. So he's not going to be a guy that goes out there and breaks the bank anyway. And it's like, if I'm like trying to improve my roster from top to bottom, which, supposedly what was Conan Weidl's big thing over the last 2 years is improving the back end of the roster as much of the front end of the roster. Baron Browning was a name that popped off, that higher pedigree guy, came in for a visit, guy we were interested, guy that I could actually see in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my guy is Roswell Douglas out of he's with Buffalo right now.
Yeah.
I've always liked how he's played, and from what I've seen, at least when I'm watching him, he's kind of having a bit of a career year. That guy is someone who you can kind of just plug in next to Joey Porter Jr. and
Absolutely.
You really shouldn't have to worry about outside corner. And he can also bump in a little depending on the situation and what else you have. If Corey Trice takes a leap or something, because Corey Trice is definitely an outside kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
The other one for me is I'm a sucker for these kinds of guys is Cameron Bynum with the Vikings. I think he's having a bit of a down year. I think he wants out. He's not really a good mesh with what Flores likes to do.
Okay.
But that kind of, player that I was talking about earlier, those big safeties, that's kind of him to a T. Cameron Bynum is, just want to make sure I have
He's
this
been a
right.
good player too.
Mhm.
He's been a
Yeah,
really good player for Minnesota.
he's a tackle machine. He's one of those lanky, solid, like down in the box kind of safeties where he's one of those ones. Josh Metellus is another. I don't know if he's a free agent. Just throwing body types out there.
Yeah.
But just those bigger guys who can roll down, and it's nice to have a guy like that, especially if you have Deshaun Elliott who can also rotate around back there. It's nice to have three guys who can play between corner and safety, which Minka and Elliott actually played down there a little bit this year. He's not going to stick to one in man, but at least make your run support a little better. But Cam Bynum's a guy who I've always kind of liked. He's just one of those players that I'm a big fan of his style. So it's funny. I would love to say receiver, but I'm with Will. I don't think anyone wants to come here. It'd kind of be a waste of air time.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, just hard to convince somebody to come that doesn't have a lot of
is there even a receiver who like Keenan Allen wouldn't want to come here?
I would say
Okay.
Justin Watson might be a guy that's not in the plans long term in Kansas City,
Mm-hmm.
who would be a nice like 3 or 4 guy to have. Better like along the lines of like the Scotty Millers and the Van Jeffersons that they had this year. I
There's
think
just
Justin Watson's better than those guys, but not a
Yeah.
like
lot.
Chris Godwin. I'm sure they've liked, but I don't think Chris Godwin likes them, so it doesn't really matter.
Not yeah. I'll go one more name. Tier Tart, the tackle
Yeah,
who used to be with Tennessee, and I forget where he was this year, but is a free agent now.
He's
He's not a 350-pound guy. He's a three tech, but he's a three tech that plays like a one tech. So I always see him as being somebody that if what you have is mostly you're playing the nickel setup on defense where you have the two interior defenders that you're mostly need to get some pass rush out of them, but yet you have to be prepared to stop the run. He's a good fit for that alongside someone like Hayward.
yeah.
I
So so he's in with the Chargers this year. That's where he was.
looking at these guys, I could see this being a really disappointing free agent year just because
Yeah.
you're going to be able to sell these guys on it being a Super Bowl year. Like these players aren't stupid, their agents aren't stupid. This year you had we got rid of Kenny Pickett, new OC. Like it becomes a lot harder to make that pitch to some of these guys. So you're going to be looking at I think more of these bounce back guys, which
Yeah, it's
kind
bounce
of
back guys, and maybe you might get like a cap casualty older players, but I don't know if that's really what they need. But you might
exactly
get a couple guys like that. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and funny enough, I know this wouldn't be the position we'd want to spend money on, and I don't think it's a position you'd have to spend a lot on with kind of where the career paths are for these two running backs. Uh, I know, I saw your reaction, well, but I will say this: I was a much bigger fan of Javonte Williams coming out in the draft class where Najee Harris was. I feel like he's a better overall player, and at this point, because of how good the draft class is going to be, I think you might be able to sell a Javonte Williams type guy where it's like, look, we are going to take one, but we're willing to give you the reins to start the year and make a case. And I feel like the running backs are going to have to wait on it because really the only one, well, and he actually got extended. Chuba Hubbard was on this list, but he got extended by Carolina. He's not going to be there. J.K. Dobbins is probably going to get an extension with the Chargers. He had a really good year there. He was another guy on this list.
Yeah.
If Nick Chubb were not to go back to Cleveland, I could see him coming here in a run heavy scheme, trying to prove that he's still worth one more contract of the sort. Again, that's not where I'd spend a lot of money, but with the way the pay has gone for running backs recently, if you're not that, King Henry, Saquon Barkley type running, Christian McCaffrey type of back, you're not going to spend a lot of money on running backs. It's just kind of how the league's gone and how it is. So if I only had to throw 2 or 3 million at a Javonte Williams type to maybe take the reins for a year, I might get on board with that because it's not really breaking the bank by any means. But Again,
I
the
would,
draft is where I want to go.
Yeah, well, you're going to get a guy in the 5th round
Yeah.
who you're going to plug in at starter, and that is probably going to play better than Javonte Williams. I mean,
Sure.
I would be on board, I think, with like a Nick Chubb kind of signing over basically any other free agent back, just because one, he's going to be, I think, dirt cheap because he didn't really do much after he came back this year.
Right.
But two, that's a guy where if he is 100%, that is a top 5 back in the league.
Right.
So that's where like I would be now I'd still draft a guy. There's no way I'm letting this running back class go all 7 rounds and I'm not drafting at least one guy. Will's putting up 2.
Yeah. Hey, trust me, that's how I feel about the defensive line class. So
same thing.
I think you just kind of talked me into that, Jeremy. I would look at bringing in Nick Chubb, and you already have Warren. I'd probably bring Warren back in, take a back somewhere between the 4th and 6th, and you're going to get a stud. The running back class is that good. You will get a stud. Good. Unless I honestly, I think it's harder to pick a bad back in like the 6th or 7th than it has been to pick a good one in the 1st through 3rd last couple of years.
I don't know if you guys saw this or whatever, but I know Nick Singleton's going back, but so is Katron Allen.
Yeah, I saw that. I bet you they're I got a lot of NIL money for him, I bet. But yeah, Nick Chubb.
So now there's only 24 incredible draftable running backs that could start for this team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Instead of 27,
Sure.
It's like worst case if Nick Chubb just doesn't have it in him. It's like you still got Warren and you drafted a guy who's going to be good. Like it's going to be really hard to draft a bad running back. Like I cannot emphasize that enough. The running back class is that good.
I always say this: there will be running backs off the street who would be perfectly fine in the Cordero Patterson role.
Yeah.
The UFL is going to have a big influx of 1,000-yard rushers this next summer.
Absolutely, man. It's going to change everything for them.
Gotcha.
Oh my God, Jeremy, put us out of our misery somehow.
I was about to say, we've talked a long time on this, and it's hard to put a final ribbon on a season. It always sucks, especially with the way Pittsburgh went out and how bad they played, and with all these questions, that we don't have answers for. Unfortunately, Steeler fans, it's just going to be a long off season, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, see if any true changes get made. I will say this. It's nice to see the media finally rain fire down on Mike Tomlin. Like it has been really bad press for him like these last 2 days. Like it's insane how many people have been on the Steelers should explore moving on from Tomlin to outright moving on, trading him. It's quite surprising. And the funny thing is, they're always like, man, I love and respect Mike Tomlin, but it's probably time. And these are all the same conversations that a lot of coaches that are no longer coaching have been in. It's just the life cycle of the league. It's amazing that, the Steelers have only had, 3 coaches in like 60 years. It's unprecedented. It's unreal. But at the same time, since the last time Mike Tomlin has won a playoff game, Doug Peterson has been hired, won a Super Bowl, fired, hired again, won a playoff game, and then fired just recently. So it just shows you that Mike Tomlin has long lived past the league norm by any means. He's actually surpassed, Bill Cowher, in years coached. It's just time to move on, and if there's one thing crystal clear that if you have not gotten away from this podcast, it's that all of us would like a clean start and a new, fresh look at this. So with that being said, the offseason always sucks because, well, let's put it this way. Enjoy the playoffs in the Super Bowl while you have it, because it's a long offseason. It's a long offseason. And for some of us, it doesn't ever really stop because we're NFL draftniks and we don't ever really stop looking at football. But the offseason always sucks, especially when you don't win the last game at the end of the year. It's that old Billy B line. If you don't win the last game of the year, who gives a shit? So you guys have anything to add to that before we sign off for one last time on this season?
I said more than my piece. I think it's
Right.
Yeah, I've said way more than my piece.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, England was still, UK was still in the European Union when Mike Tomlin won a playoff game. Um, yeah, I just feel like, you just think about Steeler fans everywhere. About the only thing that could get us halfway interested in what's happening in the season coming up is if there's a change at head coach
Yep.
or ownership. I would settle for one or the other. But I the chances of us getting that I think are pretty slim. But let's put it this way. I'm game for doing another show if something like that happens. And if it doesn't, like we'll see you for the draft extravaganza. Because otherwise it's just like we just have the same conversation that we're having right now. And we'll just do it
Mhm.
again with even worse things happening and money getting thrown at players that we don't really think are going to move the needle. So let us hope for change. And I don't know. It's like you guys have to be tired of hearing me talk about the same things. I feel like
Mhm.
we're also on Groundhog Day on the show. So I feel bad about that. I would like to find new things to rant about and new things to be happy about. There is the Zach Frasers of the world. What an awesome development that is to hit on a player at a position that's been an issue for the Steelers for some time.
Mhm.
So there are a handful of positives, and otherwise we're just waiting for the coming of Danny Rooney. It's like I sure hope Danny Rooney is any good at this job because there's so much hope hanging on him. I know
That's
I'm
so
not the only
true.
one.
That's so true. Well, with that being said, thank you all for tuning in to the last episode of the season. Unfortunately, it's on Wildcard Weekend or post Wildcard Weekend. But I'm your host, Jeremy Kohlman. You know me as Smith has spoken on the message boards, joined by Wil Masisak, you know as Bradshaw to Ben, and Korey Karbowsky, Korey 39. Thank you all for tuning in this season. We've enjoyed talking about this team for the most part. Uh, hopefully, we have some good news coming this offseason. But on that note, here we go to the offseason.
Here we go to a new owner and head coach. Woo!